This has got to be the longest break I have ever had on my channel reviewing new Herpa Wings models, but Herpa really did struggle this year to deliver anything new to the market. But now models are slowly seeping into the market and we have one in front of us, which we of course want to take a look at, especially because there has already been a lot of talk about the current Herpa Wings quality, or should I say lack of that. But what is it really that we have here in front of us? That is what we will find out in this episode, which we can do thanks to the great prices of the FMB shop, who still have a sale going on where you can make some great deals. With that, hello and welcome to a new episode of Review, where we today will take a closer look at our Boeing 787-9 of Austrian Airlines. And as we can see, in 2025, Herpa has not changed their box design, so we still have a cutout in the front with the Austrian Airlines branding on top, and the same goes for the back side, where we again have another cutout. What a sorry sight, and Herpa really does need to change this sooner rather than later, really. The good news is it does sound like they're slowly creeping into their understanding that this is not good enough. And here she is, the Boeing 787-9 in the current standard livery of Austrian Airlines. And I mean, that is already good news that we get a standard livery aircraft model, and it's been way too long since we've last had an Austrian Airlines model. So yeah, that's a good start, I would say. The model was, of course, originally anticipated for December 2024, but didn't arrive until, well, around May 2025. The reason given by Herpa Wings was logistics issues, but we have, of course, already heard quite a bit of talk in the community about some issues with the aircraft model. But how bad are they really? Well, we will find out throughout this review. And we start our tour around the aircraft model with a look at the tail section, where we on the vertical stabilizer have the Austrian Airlines branding, and also on the horizontal stabilizer we find a bit of printed detailing. That's quite nice. On the fuselage we then have the full registration code of the aircraft. We have the Austrian flag and the flag of the European Union. Unfortunately, we don't really have any other details here worth mentioning, so let's move on to the very tail of the aircraft, where we have the APU exhaust printed on. Now, on top of the fuselage, we have something good and something bad. Now, I have many times said that if a set dome is too small, just leave it away and just indicate it in print. And this is exactly what Herpa has done here, because the set dome that the aircraft model does have at the back section of the fuselage is really tiny. So they have just added it in the print. Perfect. But then we have another set dome further at the front of the aircraft, and that is quite a bit bigger in real life and also here on the model, and that we have as a physical detailing. Great. However, on the model you can see the set dome is white. In real life, it's painted in a dark grey color. Herpa, why do you keep messing up these set domes? Now, if we take a look at the model here at the front of the aircraft, we can see across the fuselage the writing of Austrian, and just underneath that we have a bunch of small points here, these small hatches or static ports that we also find on the real aircraft. So that's really lovely work here from Herpa Wings. However, they could have added the pedal tubes as well, then they really would have put off all the details that you would see on the real aircraft, from a distance at least. Then of course we have the Star Alliance logo, of which the airline is a full member, and then around the cockpit section we find the name of the aircraft. That is written in a black tone. The images that I have seen of the aircraft will depict it in a light grey tone, so I think there is a slight issue here. The rest of the cockpit section offers us the cockpit windows with the window wipers. We have a lovely marking around the radome. We of course also find the last two letters of the registration code above the cockpit windows, and here we also then have the emergency hatch for the cockpit. So that's actually overall, I think, pretty decent. The engine nacelles have been kept in all white, just as most of the fuselage, but do have the silver leading edge printed on and the safety markings. So that's, I guess, also acceptable. But the physical detailing for me is really the highlight on these engines. I really love how Herpa pulls off the chevron nozzles, and of course also here when we look into the front we can very nicely see the engine fan blades. But we will get back to the engines later in the video. From the engines we can move on to the wings, which we should also take a closer look at, starting over the top side where we have the different flaps, slats and spoilers carved out quite nicely actually, and we do also have the marking as to where to walk on the wing. So that's really lovely. The underside has more physical detailing and the full registration code of the aircraft. My highlight, however, the colored in wingtips here in the lovely Austrian red. The landing gear, that is the standard landing gear that Herpa uses for all their Dreamliners, which I think overall looks pretty decent with the main landing gear. Also the front landing gear I don't really have many issues with, except for the missing printed details here. That's really something Herpa needs to start adding. On the belly of the aircraft we do have the addition of Servus, so the branding of Austrian Airlines saying hello, slightly impelled by a hole in the fuselage for a stand that is of course not included with this aircraft model. Something much better here in the belly, however, is the fact that we do have some lovely detailing here, some physical detailing actually, around the ram air intakes. That looks pretty lovely in my opinion. And then last but not least, we do also have the doors to the cargo compartments printed on here at the back of the aircraft and also here at the front of the aircraft. So there we have it, the Boeing 787-9 in the current standard delivery of Austrian Airlines from Herpa Wings in scale 1 to 500. And what can we say about this aircraft model? Now, I don't know if my expectations for Herpa Wings models have just nosedived in the last few months where we didn't get anything from them, so that I'm actually quite happy with the model right now. I mean, overall, when I look at it, it's not bad. Now, the color issue with the name of the aircraft perhaps isn't really one. It could just be a misconception from the images, looking at aircraft from a far distance. If it is written in black, it could basically shift to a gray tone in the image, so I will give them that. But where there is a clear mistake with the print is with the set dome. That should be in a dark gray, not white. But there have, of course, been a lot of talks about the Herpa print quality overall. We have seen quite a few models in the last year's time, I would say, with increasing issues with print lines. But what about this aircraft model? Does it have any of these issues? I mean, it's not an aircraft model where you would find many print lines because most of the aircraft is painted in white. So yeah, it's hard to mess that up. Although, if anyone can, it's probably Herpa. But we have the tail section, and that is colored in red. So have they messed up here? Well, on first glimpse, not really. But if we turn the aircraft around and look at the underside here, we do have some form of overlays with the prints here. I don't know if I would call it print lines per se, but there's definitely something here. However, it is not nearly as bad as I would have expected from Herpa Wings at the moment. So again, maybe just my expectations have been lowered so much by now that I don't really want to complain about it. Also, it's on the underside of the aircraft, so hardly a part that you will see that much, unless you put it on the stand that didn't come with the aircraft model. But another issue that many collectors complained about with this aircraft model is the ground clearance of the engines. Now, for me, on this specific model, I don't think it is too bad, but it is, of course, as close as it should get. I mean, if it gets much closer, then it will be an issue. So the margins here to place these engine nacelles for the factory workers is really minimal. But I did take a look at some other Dreamliners made from Herpa Wings over the years, just to see, have they actually changed something? And it is a bit curious here when we see some models from 2017, 2021, 2022. The engines are clearly higher on the aircraft, and I find it a bit strange here because I can't really determine where they have changed something, because for me, the wings, the placements, that looks pretty much the same. Also, the pylon on where the engine is mounted looks, for me, pretty much the same, but there is a clear difference in the height. Now, I just took a bunch of random 787s from my collection, but it looks like somewhere between 2022 and 2024, the engines seem to be mounted a bit lower. So I would say there is generally a shift with a lower ground clearance on the Dreamliners from Herpa Wings. However, there does also seem to be a specific issue with this aircraft model, because I do have a source from around the factory in China which actually says that yes, they did have a production issue with this specific aircraft model, so there might be more around where the ground clearance is too low. So my recommendation is just check the model before you buy it, just to make sure that the model that you will get has enough ground clearance so that you will be happy with it. So to round this off, I am actually positively surprised about this aircraft model. Yes, I don't have the ground clearance issue, or at least not as bad as some other collectors out there, so that definitely helps with the model. Sure, the set dome is in the wrong color, but I have another set dome indicated in print, which is what I've always asked about. We have the slight color issue in the red on the underside, which makes it not as visible, but it is still there. So yeah, perhaps my expectations are just much lower than they used to be, but when I look at the model, I honestly think it looks pretty good, and would actually say if you can get it with the correct ground clearance, then it is worth having in one's collection. But is it worth 45 euros, which is the recommended retail price of Herpa Wings? Of course not. Now with that, we have reached the end of today's episode. If you have enjoyed this video, then feel free to leave a like, or if you're new around here, why not hit subscribe. With that, thanks so much for watching, hope to see you soon again. I'm checking out, and bye.